Before we get into this special weekend edition of Just the Truth, let me tell you about the latest special from Mike Lindell at MyPillow. The standard MyPillow, normally $49.98 for a limited time only, just $14.88 with promo code Joey. Go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener specials, and see all the specials. There's a limited quantity of just 10 at this special price. That's $14.88 with promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studio. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Here in South Carolina, we're making some progress when it comes to giving parents the power to choose what's best for their children's education. Now that movement just got another boost. Freedom in Education, a national organization that supports parental choice and academic freedom, has awarded a $50,000 grant to the Palmetto Promise Institute, a South Carolina-based think tank that's been leading the charge for education reform and school choice across the state. This grant will help Palmetto Promise expand access to the Education Scholarship Trust Fund, which provides scholarships for families who want private or alternative school options that better align with their child's needs and values. Joining us today, Dr. Oran Smith, a senior fellow with the Palmetto Promise Institute, to talk about what this new partnership means for South Carolina families, how the program is growing, and what's next for school choice here in the Palmetto State. Dr. Smith, as always, it's good to catch up.
Yes, always good to talk to you, Joey, especially about something that really has an impact upon real South Carolina families. And that's really what this is. ESAs, those are education scholarship accounts, they first came on the scene in 2011 in Arizona, and it was a way for parents to have access to what we'd probably call a portal, which would give them the ability to choose a provider of education, whether that would be a tutor or some evaluator, public school classes, or private schools. South Carolina's been a little late to the dance on it, and part of it's legislative and part of it's legal. We passed a very robust ESA bill in 2023, but then it was struck down by the state Supreme Court. So the legislature went back in and passed a new bill, which is so much better, and that's kind of what this grant is all about.
Yeah. And talk with us, Dr. Smith, in more detail. I mean, this $50,000 grant from Freedom in Education, it kind of comes at a good time, right? I mean, talk with us about the funds and how they'll be used and why this partnership matters to South Carolina families.
Yes. Well, when this Education Scholarship Account Act was passed, which we call ESTF, the Education Scholarship Trust Fund, the only weakness about the legislation is there's no one charged with selling the program. So if you're a parent and you are deciding what is the best option for your child, you're probably just going to go to the local public school that your zip code zones you for without really looking around a whole lot. And you certainly would not know about 10,000 scholarships that have these special funding mechanisms that allows you to have a wide range of choice for your child. So in essence, we're the marketers. We're the sales team. We're reaching out in all the communities and virtually and through our website, scschoolchoice.com, to let the people of South Carolina know about this new program.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Education Scholarship Trust Fund. It began and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe I remember 5,000 scholarships initially, and this year that has grown. Talk with us about those numbers and the fact that it has been increased. Does that kind of tell us that there is demand for this?
I think it does, and we really want to show that there's more demand than scholarships available, and so far that's what's been happening. For the 2025-26 school year, which is sort of almost to the end of the first semester now. I find that hard to believe, by the way, that it's already as late in the year as it is. Sure. But there are 10,000 scholarships for 25-26, and there will be 15,000 for 26-27. So the amount of funding that goes into that account that's controlled by the parent is about $7,600, $7,634 to be exact, and that's related to the amount that the state funds for students in regular public school, with some factors built in to allow that to grow every year. But the key factor to remember is there are 10,000 scholarships this year, 15,000 next year. The 10,000 scholarships for 25-26 were snapped up very quickly, and there is a long waiting list presently for that. So what we would like to see is for 26-27 for those 15,000 scholarships to be taken up, and maybe as many as that same number, 15,000 more, on the waiting list. And if that happens, that's a strong message to the legislature to do something they're allowed to do in the legislation, and that is expand the funding, create more scholarships. That would be our dream.
Yeah. On our guest line today, Dr. Oran Smith, Senior Fellow with the Palmetto Promise Institute. What would be the argument against doing that? I mean, what's the is there hesitancy among lawmakers to expand the program, or is it just sort of they're waiting to see just how popular it becomes?
I think you're exactly right. I think they're waiting to see how popular it will be. At one point, they were kind of calling it a pilot program, and it was only going to have a limit of 2 or 3 years. They took all that pilot language off. They also took out some language that required a student to have gone to public school the year before. That was significant. So for this 25-26 school year, you don't have to have attended public school previously. So students that are currently in private school whose parents may be working 2 or 3 jobs to pay for their education, these accounts are now available for that $7,600 funding for the child. So a lot of students that are already in private schools or religious schools are choosing to use it, but also parents who didn't know they had a choice, and all of a sudden they do, and they have a wide choice of any school or other types of education, online education, many different options that are available because of the flexibility of these education scholarship accounts.
Yeah. Is that a challenge in itself? Do you find that some people just don't know what the program is, and they don't know what school choice means, that they're not familiar with the Education Scholarship Trust Fund and how it works? Is there a need to educate parents of what this program is?
Oh, there absolutely is, and that's why we set up scschoolchoice.com. That's scschoolchoice.com, so that parents can be educated about it. When the program first launched, before it was shut down by the Supreme Court, a lot of the applications that the State Department of Education received, some of them were for parents who thought it was a program for college or thought it was for pre-K, or really a lot of misunderstanding. And that's before we really got in earnest and began teaching, in essence, or educating the people of South Carolina about what the program is all about. So this grant that you mentioned, that allows us to do so much more: teaching, educating, marketing, explaining the program. Some parents find it just absolutely too good to be true, but it's not. It actually does exist in South Carolina. Now, there are over 700,000 students in traditional public schools. The 26-27 program for this will have 15,000. So it's not going to be an earth-shattering number, but it is a beginning. And I think once the legislature sees that it's working and starting to see how the lives of these kids are being changed by their new experiences, I really think it's going to take off, and the legislature is going to lift that cap.
Yeah. Dr. Smith, let's go back, and I want you to take a minute and kind of pat yourself on the back, if you will, because when you mentioned it being challenged with the South Carolina Supreme Court, and that was a delay with the program. Talk about how Palmetto Promise Institute stepped up, because people were already in the program. I mean, they were already involved in it, and how you guys stepped up to help those families out.
Well, the day that we found out, and it was September 11th, a date that we'll always remember for other reasons, but it was September 11th, we learned that the state Supreme Court had, in essence, shut down the program for all except for some of the tutoring and other providers that were not private schools. So if you were a private school parent benefiting from this program, then suddenly you were looking at running out of money after the first 9 weeks to fund your child's education. So our president, Wendy Damron, went to some donors, both in the state and in the country, and raised the several $1 million that was needed to fund the rest of the school year, so that these kids who had just gotten into their new schools could enjoy the entire school year in that school. And that was key to it, but also we had to fight the legal fight. So we worked on an amicus brief that was filed in the case. We asked the legislature to jump in and make some of the changes that the court recommended, get a new bill up, get that bill passed. So S62 was passed to renew the program and make some corrections that we hope that the court will like if it's ever enjoined or there's an attempt to enjoin it in the future. Right now, there has not been a lawsuit. We hope that there isn't another lawsuit. We think that the legislation fixes any problems that the Supreme Court identified. So just a lot of things went into surviving the court challenge, getting the bill passed again, getting these kids funded, and that's kind of what Palmetto Promise has been all about in this ESTF program.
Sure. Well, I applaud you for what you did to step in. And, one of the misconceptions I think that is out there is that the Education Scholarship Trust Fund and this whole program is for the wealthy and the well-connected. Talk with us about that, because that's just clearly not the case.
Right. Well, it's really for anyone that wants something matched specifically to their child. You can have some very creative plans. Say if you had a child that needed certain types of therapy, maybe they needed certain types of counseling, maybe they need a little bit of tutoring, maybe they wanted to take one class from the local public school, maybe they wanted to take some classes virtually. I mean, you could create just on the fly a customized plan for your child. And I think a lot of this was kind of going on during COVID anyway. A lot of parents were for the first time really taking stock of what their child's education was like and whether the type of education they were getting was a good match. A lot of parents just simply, they want their child to go to a different public school. So all of this becomes possible with a program like this. And ultimately, I can't predict the future, but I think this is the future. Parents being able to take the funds, essentially allowing those funds to follow that child to go to whatever type of program that parent chooses that matches that child's needs perfectly. And I really do think that's the future, one way or another.
Yeah. If you were to compare what we're doing here in South Carolina to other states, Dr. Smith, how do we compare? How does our program compare to others?
Well, we were to take the largest number that's in play right now, which is that 15,000 number for 26-27 that's coming up for that school year, and we were to compare it to Tennessee and Georgia and North Carolina and Florida. South Carolina would most likely be the lowest number and the lowest percentage, simply because Tennessee just passed a robust new program. Georgia has a relatively new program. North Carolina built theirs up, and Florida is school choice heaven. School choice in Florida has just become a part of regular life there. They have hundreds of thousands of scholarships available every year, and their program is very, very successful. A lot of that began when Jeb Bush was governor and has continued now under Governor DeSantis and others to just really open up the market. And it's transformed Florida and helped them with their academic issues that they had in the past in Florida. So it can be transformative for improvement on standardized test scores and things of this nature when students are matched to the perfect environment and the perfect situation for that individual child. And, you may have 3 children, maybe they're all on the ESTF program, but all of them have slightly different educational experiences and settings. But that's possible with the ESTF, and we're just excited to start hearing these stories come in of these lives being transformed by the options that they now have with this program.
Yeah, well, Dr. Oran Smith with Palmetto Promise Institute, it's always a pleasure, and I thank you for being with us today and for the incredible work you and your team are doing to make education more accessible for families across the Palmetto State. Look, if you want to learn more about this program, go to scschoolchoice.com, SCSchoolChoice.com if you want to learn more about what the great work that Palmetto Promise does. And they do a lot of work, not only in education, but other issues as well. PalmettoPromise.org, PalmettoPromise.org. Dr. Smith, always a pleasure. Appreciate you, and we'll talk again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Joining us on our guest line today is Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union. It's an organization that really sort of like the voice of America's taxpayers, if you will, as they work towards a more simple and fair tax system. Welcome to the show. Appreciate your time today.
Great to be here.
Let's just start with, say, your elevator speech about what the National Taxpayers Union does.
We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan citizen organization founded all the way back in 1969 to work for lower, fairer, simpler taxes, less wasteful government spending, and accountability from public officials at all levels, from the local all the way up to the international.
And you can find out additional information about the great work that they're doing at their website, ntu.org, ntu.org. One of the issues that you're working on, Pete, is a potential change in how lenders qualify home buyers for a mortgage loan. And as I understand it, the Federal Housing Finance Agency is proposing changes to this process. Director Bill Pulte argues that adding VantageScore 4.0, which I guess is a relatively new system, will open the door to more home ownership. The big question, though, is could this expanded access actually bring maybe more underqualified buyers into the housing market and increase the risk of repeating what we saw in 2008?
Yeah, and that is the big question here. And this is why taxpayers need to care. All the way back in the late 1980s, National Taxpayers Union was testifying before Congress and warning that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two mortgage guarantee giants, they bundle mortgages into securities and put them on the open market to encourage liquidity in the mortgage market. And the practices of these entities, because they are at once privately financed by shareholders but also government run, makes them step into this gray area where taxpayers could be on the hook for some severe liabilities. We saw that in 2008 with the subprime mortgage crisis meltdown, where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac held about 70% of those subprime loans, which turned out to be bad in many cases and led to almost $200 billion in liabilities that taxpayers had to step in and cover. That bailout could be far, far costlier if it were to happen again today. And so taxpayers have an interest in ensuring that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are overseen by this Federal Housing Finance Agency to the letter, very carefully, to ensure we don't get into another bailout situation. How do we avoid a bailout? Well, one way we do that is to have accurate tools to measure the risks of all of the loans that Fannie and Freddie are holding. VantageScore 4.0 is a new credit scoring system that Director Pulte has said will operate alongside the traditional FICO credit scoring system. We are all for competition here at National Taxpayers Union. What we're also for, though, is taxpayer protection. And the big question is, will VantageScore's entry into credit scoring mean more or less risk to taxpayers? That is an open question. A number of entities like American Enterprise Institute, Milliman, and others have had side-by-side comparisons of FICO and VantageScore, and they've said, well, there may not be a whole lot of difference in predictability here. So if the goal is to simply let more homeowners qualify for loans, that still means the potential for additional risk. We're not getting better predictability here. We're just getting more loans. That's not the way taxpayers want to see this go.
Yeah. With me today is Pete Sepp, president of the National Taxpayers Union. Now, Pete, as I understand it, and this is totally new to me. I mean, I obviously am aware of what happened in 2008 and aware of how the process goes when someone is potentially looking to buy a home. But as I understand it, VantageScore was developed not too awfully long ago. It's a relatively new model compared to FICO, as you mentioned, which has had decades of proven performance. My question is, should we really be testing what appears to be an unproven credit scoring system when what we have seems to work when used properly?
Yeah, that is a very good question. This whole process of introducing VantageScore began when Congress passed a law about 7 years ago saying that the Federal Housing Finance Agency needs to hold a competition among credit score models to figure out if FICO's still the best or if there should be other models allowed in. Again, fine if this happens organically in the private sector. If FICO happens to get a competitor with better predictability of risk, so be it. But from the beginning, this has been forced by government. This whole competition has been something that Congress wanted to see, and the FHFA decided we're going to hold this competition. We still don't know how the competition was actually held. We don't have access to all of the evaluations that the government did to determine that now we're going to have both FICO and VantageScore being used by Fannie and Freddie. That's problem number one. We need transparency into how this decision was reached. Problem number two is to have more public evaluations of the two credit scoring systems. I mentioned two that have already occurred, those evaluations. We need more before we let this thing become institutionalized and potentially have an inaccurate indicator of risk.
Yeah. Pete Sepp is president of the National Taxpayers Union. You can find out additional information at their website, ntu.org, ntu.org. Pete, let's go back to that 2008, 2009 period there with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Is it fair to say that that period of time and what we saw had happened proved that maybe not everyone should be a homeowner?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Homeownership is the American dream, but the way you reach that dream is as important as getting there itself. If government creates shortcuts whereby you don't have the capacity to pay back the loan, or you're in over your head, or there are tax burdens that aren't accounted for down the line in the loan qualification and the mortgage process. That's unfair not only to taxpayers, it's unfair to the homeowners themselves. Who wants to be in the position of having to default on a loan and being kicked out of a home that you worked so hard to get into in the first place? That's what can happen if we have inaccurate credit scoring, if we have Congress and the executive branch saying, we don't care about the risk, put more people in homes. That's not the way to do it here.
Yeah. You know, I had a personal experience, Pete, during that time period. I did some volunteer work for an upstate South Carolina nonprofit housing developer. And their goal was to try to get as many people in the homes as they could. And I witnessed firsthand. I guess I probably just didn't completely. I went into this thinking that I was doing something good, but as it turned out, 2-3 years into this, I realized that, you know, as I said, not everybody is cut out to be a homeowner. Because here's what I saw, Pete. I saw people who qualified easily enough. They could make that monthly payment, but when the HVAC went out or when they had a plumbing issue or roofing issue, they didn't have the money to take care of those maintenance issues. And a lot of them ended up using those homes that this great group, local group, helped them get into.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's not just the monthly mortgage
Yeah.
or the down payment, it's the maintenance and, frankly, the property taxes.
Yeah.
I was shocked to learn when I was preparing comments for another federal agency about barriers to home ownership that on average, 44% of a mortgage closing is comprised of taxes,
Yeah.
property taxes, transfer taxes, all kinds of unknown hidden taxes that you never deal with until you get into the actual closing on the loan. That's a huge burden.
Yeah. So back to this potential problem then. The FICO model has been pretty consistent, pretty predictable for what, 30 plus years now.
Yeah.
So why do you think policymakers would jeopardize that stability? And is this not an example of if it's not broke, don't fix it?
Yeah, I think you put it very well earlier that the goal was not necessarily to have accurate credit scoring, accurate assessments of risk. It was to kind of game the system and say, well, if FICO isn't going to let enough borrowers into the
Yeah.
process to the satisfaction of policymakers, let's just put another score into the mix. And again, I've got nothing against other scoring methods coming into this market, but it has to happen naturally in the way that private sector competition always does. If somebody builds a better mousetrap, that mousetrap wins. It gets more customers. But when government says, we don't care if it's better or not, you're going to use this mousetrap and like it, well, that's
Yeah.
wrong. And that's what ends up putting liabilities on the backs of taxpayers.
Well, and as taxpayers, we all should be concerned about this. I mean, look, if someone qualifies for a home, I want them to be in a home. As you said a minute ago, it's the American dream to own your own home. But it just seems on the surface, and again, this was brand new to me until just recently, that this is a government sponsored effort to give more access, if you will, only to potentially see more defaults, more foreclosures, and by introducing VantageScore, I think it's setting taxpayers up for maybe another Fannie and Freddie bailout.
Yeah, and we cannot afford that. That's the other problem here. Way back in 2008, when we had a fiscal crisis and the bailout occurred, the national debt as a percent of our economy was about 35%. It went up to over 65% at the end of the crisis. Right now, it's above 120%. Now,
Yeah.
that's a lot of percentages, but the point is, we do not have the same kind of fiscal capacity for a bailout today that we did back in 2008. And
Yeah.
so we have to be extra careful.
I know it's been a few years now, but has Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? I mean, have they totally recovered from that period of time?
Many experts would say yes, they're in much better shape financially. I would still point out, though, that their capital requirements, the cash reserves that they have to ensure against a downturn, are still less as a percentage than what many banks have. And so we still have to be very careful about making sure those two entities are not stretched too thin because many of them, I mean, Fannie and Freddie dwarf the assets of most banks in the United States or the world today. So if they come crashing down, that's going to precipitate a crisis across the economy, not just the housing sector.
Yeah. One final question for you, Pete, and I do appreciate your time today. Uh, who developed VantageScore? Who owns it now?
Well, that was actually developed by the credit bureaus themselves. In other words, the ones that process the reports, they kind of have a different role in the mortgage process from FICO or other scoring entities. But yeah, VantageScore was created by them. And so you kind of have what might be a conflict of interest there. And I think Tim Scott, South Carolina
Yep.
senator who's chair of the banking committee, I know he's supported competition in credit scoring. We do too, as long as it happens naturally. I think his committee would be well served to take a look now that this whole process has unfolded over several years and say, look, where are we right now in terms of risk to taxpayers, risk to the markets?
Well, and I'm kind of due to have Senator Scott on the show. I haven't had him on in a few weeks, so maybe I need to get him on and ask that question.
That would be an ideal one. We would love to know an answer.
Yeah. Pete, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for what you guys do. For more information about this great organization, the National Taxpayers Union, go to ntu.org, ntu.org. Have a great one.
You too. My pleasure. Take care.
That's it for this special weekend edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.